There are machines that don't just move people, they move through time itself, untouched by fashion, greed, or obsolescence. They rumble on in a way that feels almost mythical, their engines more heartbeat than hardware, their silhouettes unbothered by the churn of design trends. You see one glide by and realize it's not just transportation, it's evidence that once upon a time durability was an art form. Built when engineering was measured not by how light or fast something could be, but by how long it would last. Every creak, every clatter, every mile tells a story of craftsmanship that refused compromise, a quiet defiance against everything disposable. It's not nostalgia. It's proof of what permanence can look like when done right. Stick around because today, we're unpacking the story of a legend that earned its reputation the hard way. Subscribe and tell us in the comments what classic you want broken down next. The Mercedes 300D turbo diesel began life not as an icon, but as a solution to a problem: how to deliver comfort and prestige without sacrificing reliability in an era shaken by fuel crises and shifting priorities. When Mercedes-Benz introduced the 300D in the late 1970s and refined it through the 1980s, it wasn't chasing performance headlines or sculpted design awards. It was chasing something rarer: trust. At the heart of that pursuit sat the OM617 engine, a 5-cylinder turbo diesel that seemed to run forever. It wasn't beautiful in a cinematic way. Its sound was agricultural, its acceleration leisurely, but it had a kind of dignity only mechanical honesty can create. Mercedes built the 300D turbo diesel for people who wanted their car to be a tool, not a toy. An investment, not an indulgence, and that guiding principle defined every design choice. To understand the origins of the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel, you have to picture West Germany in the 1970s. Oil shocks were rewriting the automotive world. Gasoline prices soared and emissions rules tightened. Mercedes faced a crossroads. It could either scale back its ambitions or engineer its way out of the crisis. Diesel engines, long trusted in taxis and trucks, offered a path forward, but they carried a stigma of noise and slowness. Mercedes engineers didn't flinch. They believed that if they could civilize diesel power without sacrificing longevity, they could build something that transcended economic cycles. The development of the OM617 was both conservative and revolutionary. Conservative in that it built upon the proven OM616 4-cylinder diesel architecture. Revolutionary in that it added a 5th cylinder and later a turbocharger, elements that brought smoother operation and usable torque for real-world driving. This wasn't performance for bragging rights. It was performance for purpose. The car could cruise on the Autobahn at respectable speeds, haul heavy loads up alpine grades, and idle for hours in the heat without complaint. The simplicity of its mechanical fuel injection, the absence of fragile electronics, and the robustness of its internals were not accidents. They were deliberate acts of over-engineering. Mercedes engineers believed that perfection was a matter of endurance. The body structure of the W123 chassis that housed the 300D turbo diesel was designed to withstand rust, time, and neglect. Thick-gauge steel, reinforced door frames, and meticulous galvanization turned what might have been an ordinary sedan into something that could endure decades of weather and wear. Even the doors closed with a weighty click that seemed to promise permanence. Inside, the dashboard plastics were not soft-touch marketing gimmicks. They were chosen because they wouldn't crack under UV light. Seat frames were built like architectural components. It all contributed to a strange paradox. The car was modest in personality, yet extravagant in execution. Ownership of a Mercedes 300D turbo diesel was never about speed. It was about rhythm. Owners learned to live in its pace, to understand that 0 to 60 in 13 seconds wasn't a limitation, but an invitation to experience momentum differently. The car rewarded anticipation, smoothness, and patience. It turned everyday driving into a ritual of mechanical empathy. That rhythm created a cult-like bond between car and driver, one that modern, insulated vehicles rarely replicate. It was a machine that didn't try to hide what it was doing. You could feel every combustion, every shift, every heartbeat. In America, the 300D turbo diesel became a quiet statement. It wasn't flashy, but it was confident. A symbol of success that didn't shout. College professors drove them. Doctors kept them for decades. Taxi drivers trusted them to cross continents. It was common to see odometers rolling past 400,000 miles with engines untouched, except for oil changes and valve adjustments. The car's slow but unstoppable character matched a certain kind of owner, practical, patient, unhurried by trends. It was the thinking person's luxury, appealing to those who believed that quality should be felt, not advertised. Every system in the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel reflected that philosophy. The transmission was calibrated not for snap shifts but for longevity. The suspension, with its supple ride and controlled damping, favored composure over cornering theatrics. Power steering was deliberate and weighty. The climate control, sometimes maligned for its complexity, was nonetheless engineered for endurance. Even the paint process, involving multiple coats and extensive baking, was designed to preserve the car's finish for decades. These weren't marketing points. They were evidence of an engineering culture that equated durability with honor. The 300D turbo diesel also represented a kind of engineering restraint that feels foreign today. Mercedes engineers could have pushed for higher horsepower, lighter materials, or cheaper construction. But they didn't. They prioritized reliability, ease of maintenance, and predictable behavior. They designed the OM6115 to be repairable with hand tools, accessible in rural areas, and tolerant of low-grade fuel. This wasn't nostalgia. It was a pragmatic understanding of what customers actually needed in a world where resources weren't guaranteed. The car was global before globalization became a buzzword. That pragmatism made the 300D turbo diesel something of a moral statement. It stood against built-in obsolescence. It said that a car could be luxurious not because it was disposable, but because it refused to die. In that sense, it was more than transportation. It was a philosophy rendered in metal. That philosophy would later clash with the demands of modernization, emission standards, and corporate profit margins, but in its time, it was pure. As the 1980s unfolded, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel evolved slightly, but never betrayed its essence. Minor cosmetic updates came, as did refinements in interior materials and safety features, yet the core remained. It was still the car you could take across the country with nothing but a wrench set and confidence. And perhaps most importantly, it became the cornerstone of Mercedes' reputation in America, a reputation for unbreakable engineering that still lingers in the collective memory of car enthusiasts. The 300D turbo diesel wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And honesty never goes out of style. To this day, you'll find examples idling contentedly in small towns, still wearing their original hubcaps, still starting on cold mornings, still reminding anyone who listens that quality is a choice, not an accident. This car set a standard that many tried to follow but few understood. And that brings us to the turning point. What happens when a car so thoroughly embodies permanence that the world around it moves on without it? In the next segment, we'll look at how the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel met its challengers, shaped perceptions, and eventually faced the pressures that even it couldn't outrun. When the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel entered the heart of the 1980s, it had already earned a quiet reputation as the car that simply refused to quit. By the time the model's turbocharged variant took root in the American market, the 300D turbo diesel had become a rolling contradiction, luxurious yet humble, slow yet unstoppable, old world yet strangely modern. But this era wasn't just about endurance anymore. It was about identity. In a landscape filled with increasingly computerized rivals and new safety regulations, the 300D turbo diesel had to prove it could still matter beyond its reputation. The Mercedes 300D turbo diesel wasn't a performer in the traditional sense, but it excelled where others stumbled. The turbocharger, introduced to give the car more power for US highways, didn't turn it into a sports sedan. It simply made it livable in a faster world. Suddenly, the diesel's 120 horsepower didn't seem so meek, especially when paired with its trademark torque that came in early and stayed consistent. This new drivability meant the 300D could blend with traffic, merge confidently, and cruise for hours at 80 miles per hour with little stress. That's when the legend began to crystallize, not in glossy ads, but in the lived experience of owners who realized their cars were aging in reverse. Throughout the 1980s, Mercedes-Benz found itself at a crossroads. Competitors were discovering that consumers loved electronics, digital dashboards, and turbocharged gasoline engines. The 300D turbo diesel stood apart, mechanical, analog, defiantly overbuilt. What might have seemed outdated to some became a badge of honor to others. Its reputation spread not through dealerships but through word of mouth, through taxi fleets in Europe and Africa, and through used car lots where high mileage wasn't a warning but a credential. People began to measure the worth of their 300D in stories, cross-country trips, harsh winters, decades without major repairs. In the American market, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel found an unlikely cult following. It wasn't flashy enough for Beverly Hills, yet it became the unofficial car of intellectuals, engineers, and professionals who prized substance over style. It wasn't a status symbol. It was a statement of values. In an age where excess defined success, this car whispered something different. Buy once, buy right. The fuel economy was respectable, the comfort timeless, the reliability unmatched. Even the sound of the diesel engine, once mocked for its clatter, became a kind of comfort. A mechanical heartbeat that reminded owners their car was alive and working hard. Of course, the 300D turbo diesel wasn't without rivals. Another manufacturer might have offered a smoother ride or a faster 0 to 60 time, but few could match the Mercedes in lifespan. Competitors chased innovation. Mercedes pursued permanence. That difference mattered. Owners who bought the 300D often kept it for decades, sometimes passing it down like a family heirloom. Maintenance wasn't cheap, but it was consistent, and when done properly, it rewarded loyalty with reliability few modern vehicles could replicate. The aftermarket world embraced the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel as well. Mechanics loved it for its accessibility. No proprietary software, no black box electronics. You could rebuild one in your garage if you had the patience. Enthusiasts began to push boundaries, biodiesel conversions, cross-country endurance runs, even off-road adaptations in Africa and the Middle East. The car proved its adaptability in environments it was never designed for, from desert trails to frozen highways. That flexibility only deepened the mythology. But mythology can be a burden. As emission standards tightened and fuel injection technology moved toward electronics, the analog purity of the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel began to look dated. Mercedes-Benz itself evolved, embracing luxury and technology in ways that left the old diesel ethos behind. By the early 1990s, the model faded from showrooms, replaced by sleeker, quieter, more efficient successors. Yet even as the automotive world modernized, something was lost, a kind of moral clarity in engineering that prioritized longevity over novelty. In Europe, the 300D turbo diesel continued to serve as the backbone of taxi fleets well into the new millennium. In Africa, it became a workhorse, beloved for its ability to endure poor roads and questionable fuel. In the United States, used examples began appearing in the driveways of enthusiasts who appreciated the car's quirks. The vacuum lock system, the glow plug ritual, the way the cabin smelled faintly of diesel and old leather. For those who understood it, the 300D turbo diesel wasn't just transportation. It was a form of resistance against planned obsolescence. The car's presence in popular culture grew subtly. It wasn't a movie star's car or a collector's darling. It was the reliable background player, the car you noticed only when you realized it never broke down. That humility became part of its appeal. Owners loved that the 300D didn't beg for attention. It simply delivered year after year. In a sense, it embodied an old-fashioned idea of luxury. Not opulence, but confidence. Technically, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel was a marvel of restraint. Its turbocharger was modest, designed for longevity rather than thrills. Its cooling system was oversized for reliability. Even its interior electronics, by the standards of the time, were minimal. It didn't need digital gauges or adaptive suspensions to feel advanced. It achieved sophistication through refinement of the basics. This kind of engineering discipline is rare today because it doesn't photograph well. It's invisible until something goes wrong. And with the 300D turbo diesel, things rarely did. Still, time marched on. As the 1990s progressed, automotive trends shifted toward efficiency and emissions control. Diesel engines faced skepticism, especially in the US, where gasoline remained cheap and clean air legislation grew stricter. Mercedes adapted, but the magic of the OM 617 era faded. To enthusiasts, that transition marked the end of something irreplaceable, a kind of handshake between human and machine that modern technology would never quite replicate. And yet, decades later, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel continues to show up in conversations about longevity. It remains a benchmark not just for what cars could do mechanically, but for what they represented philosophically. When you see one still running, it challenges assumptions about progress. It reminds you that engineering doesn't have to chase the future. It can master the present so completely that it becomes timeless. That's the paradox of the 300D turbo diesel. It thrived in a world that no longer exists. yet it continues to outlive the cars that replaced it. And that raises the ultimate question. What happens when a car designed to last forever meets a culture that doesn't? That's where we'll go next, as we explore how the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel's legacy evolved, what lessons it left behind, and why it still matters today. The Mercedes 300D turbo diesel proved that engineering integrity could outlast trends, but its real story begins after its production ended. Once new models replaced it and the OM617 engine retired, something fascinating happened. The 300D turbo diesel didn't fade, it multiplied. Its reputation grew precisely because it was no longer being made. Enthusiasts, mechanics, and everyday drivers began treating it like a standard of truth in a marketplace full of exaggeration. The car that once blended quietly into traffic now stood as a rebuke to everything disposable about modern motoring. The endurance of the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel wasn't just mechanical, it was cultural. Owners discovered that their cars had become rolling archives of a lost philosophy. In garages and driveways across America, people started restoring 300Ds not for nostalgia's sake, but because they recognized a kind of perfection that didn't need updating. The appeal wasn't about performance. It was about authenticity. This was a car that had nothing to hide. Every sound, every vibration, every bit of patina told the truth. In an era of touchscreens and synthetic exhaust notes, that honesty felt revolutionary. What makes the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel remarkable is how it continues to teach lessons about balance and design restraint. Its mechanical simplicity, mechanical fuel injection, minimal electronics, and robust materials makes it nearly immune to the failures that plague more complex modern vehicles. Yet its refinement proved that simplicity doesn't have to mean crude. The suspension offered a ride that was smooth without being soft. The cabin was functional but genuinely comfortable. Even the climate system, complicated as it was, worked for decades if maintained with care. It was a machine built with respect for its user, and that respect was mutual. Today, the 300D turbo diesel lives on in ways its creators probably never imagined. It's part of the overlanding community, where durability trumps horsepower. It's part of the sustainability conversation, as drivers experiment with biodiesel and synthetic fuels to keep them running clean. And it's part of the collector market, where interest is no longer about luxury but legacy. People aren't buying them to show off. They're buying them because they represent the end of an era when engineering came before marketing. The Mercedes 300D turbo diesel's legacy also shapes how we think about longevity in the digital age. Modern cars, packed with sensors and software, can't age gracefully. They either work perfectly or fail catastrophically. The 300D occupies a different realm. It can limp, heal, and keep going. You can diagnose it with your senses, not a scan tool. You can feel its health in the way it idles, hear it in the rhythm of its injectors. That tactile relationship between driver and machine has become almost extinct, and yet it's what makes these cars so emotionally resonant. Beyond enthusiasts, the 300D turbo diesel has become a teaching tool for younger generations of mechanics. It's often used in trade schools to illustrate fundamental engine principles: compression ignition, fuel timing, vacuum systems. Unlike modern engines sealed behind plastic covers, this one invites curiosity. It rewards learning by doing, and that's perhaps its greatest afterlife. It continues to create mechanics, tinkerers and problem solvers. Economically, the 300D turbo diesel reveals something too: the value of predictability. Owners don't fear catastrophic failures because the car was designed for serviceability. Parts remain available thanks to decades of production and a global following. Communities have formed online where owners trade repair tips, swap parts, and share stories of six-figure mileage milestones. In a world that discards products after a few years, this car thrives on continuity. Even its quirks have become part of its charm. The vacuum-operated locks that hiss softly when engaging, the long glow plug wait on cold mornings, the deliberate gear shifts of its transmission. All these details create a kind of mechanical personality. It's not flawless, but it's faithful, and that consistency builds emotional investment. Owners often describe their 300D turbo diesel as a companion rather than a possession. That bond is why so many survive. People simply can't bring themselves to part with them. The car's ongoing relevance also hints at a deeper truth about consumer values. As industries chase faster cycles of innovation, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel demonstrates the counterpoint, that there's power in permanence. When you build something to last, it becomes self-sustaining. It earns loyalty that advertising can't buy. The diesel's longevity gave Mercedes a reputation that carried decades beyond its showroom presence, anchoring the brand's credibility, even as its newer vehicles became more complex and fragile. In the broader automotive landscape, the Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel stands as a case study in unintentional iconography. It was never meant to be romanticized, yet it became romantic because of its authenticity. It never tried to be collectible, yet collectors now seek it out. It was designed to be used, not preserved, and that's precisely why so many examples still exist, still running, still starting every morning with the same patient clatter. The 300D Turbo Diesel's legacy isn't about nostalgia, it's about relevance. In a time when sustainability is a global concern, this car quietly reminds us that the greenest vehicle is often the one that's already built. Its efficiency comes not from software or hybrid systems, but from its refusal to die. Every year a 300D stays on the road is another year it doesn't demand new resources, new production, new waste. That kind of environmental logic was accidental at the time, but prophetic now. Ultimately, the Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel endures because it represents something people still crave: trust. It keeps its promises. It may be slow, it may be dated, but it never betrays you. In a marketplace filled with constant updates and hidden compromises, that constancy feels radical. Its story isn't just about cars, it's about the human desire for reliability, for something solid in a world that changes too fast. So what's the lasting message of the Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel? That perfection isn't about performance, it's about persistence. The 300D doesn't need to be faster, flashier, or smarter. It just needs to start, run, and endure. And somehow that's more inspiring than any innovation pitch or luxury tagline could ever be. In the next and final section, we'll bring all of this together. What the 300D Turbo Diesel means for today's drivers, what to watch for if you want one, and why its quiet defiance still matters on modern roads. For anyone in today's market looking at the Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel, the car's relevance goes far beyond nostalgia. It's a living reminder of what mechanical honesty feels like. The 300D Turbo Diesel isn't fast and it doesn't coddle, but when you turn that key and hear the steady rhythm of its OM 617 engine, you understand why it became a legend. There's something deeply satisfying about a machine that rewards care with loyalty. You don't just own a 300D Turbo Diesel, you join a lineage. In the US, surviving examples of the Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel can still be found in remarkable condition. Prices vary depending on mileage and maintenance, but even well-kept cars often cost less than a new economy sedan. They're not cheap to restore if neglected, but they're predictable. Every part of the car was designed to be fixable. Common issues revolve around vacuum systems, aging rubber lines, and rust in climates that salted roads, but the fundamentals remain bulletproof. With regular oil changes, valve adjustments, and clean fuel, the engine can outlast multiple owners. That's not myth, that's mathematics of good engineering. For American buyers, import considerations are minimal since these cars were sold here officially for years. Later, European market diesels, often with manual transmissions, are now eligible for import under the 25-year rule and can offer slightly better fuel economy. Enthusiasts seek out rust-free Southern or West Coast examples, as corrosion is the only true enemy. Maintenance records matter more than mileage. A well-maintained 400,000-mile 300D Turbo Diesel is often a better buy than a neglected one with half the miles. Reliability, however, doesn't mean invincibility. The Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel rewards attention. It likes clean fluids, consistent servicing, and a patient driver who understands that this car's rhythm is steady, not hurried. It was built for endurance, not instant gratification. On modern highways filled with hybrids and crossovers, it stands apart, quietly chugging along, immune to trends. That resilience makes it one of the few classic cars you can truly daily drive without apology. The ownership experience today is almost therapeutic. The mechanical clatter that once seemed crude becomes a kind of meditation. You feel connected to the engine, to the road, to time itself. There's no screen, no software, no updates, just steel, oil, and combustion. It demands engagement, and in return it offers something modern cars can't: permanence. The Mercedes 300D Turbo Diesel teaches patience in an impatient world. Its lasting legacy, especially in the United States, is how it redefined what luxury could mean. Luxury wasn't about chrome or speed. It was about confidence in your machine. Every time a 300D turbo diesel glides past still running strong, it tells the same quiet story, that real quality doesn't shout. It endures. For collectors, that lesson has real value. A good example today isn't just a car, it's a statement about how you think the world should build things. As younger enthusiasts discover these diesels, the 300D turbo diesel bridges generations. It's approachable, understandable, and endlessly teachable. It's a physical argument for slowing down, taking care, and investing in longevity rather than consumption. In that sense, it's more than a car. It's a philosophy on wheels. So if you see one for sale or parked quietly on a street corner still ticking away after 40 years, remember what it represents. The Mercedes 300D turbo diesel isn't about performance charts or technology lists. It's about proving that restraint can be powerful, that over-engineering can be beautiful, and that reliability can be revolutionary. In an age when cars are designed to age out of relevance in a few years, this one stands as living proof that excellence doesn't expire. It's slow, yes, but it's unstoppable. It's old, but not obsolete. And as long as someone still believes that quality matters, the Mercedes 300D turbo diesel will keep running, mile after mile, decade after decade, reminding us that forever isn't just an idea. It's something you can drive.